I welcome you all to this session on Paradise Lost. We have had two sessions in the past, two lecture series on Paradise Lost. This is supposed to be the third lecture series on Paradise Lost. So today we will be starting from line number 27, and we completed invocation last day. We kind of recapped all the points that were there in invocation. I hope you people remember those points. If you don't, kindly go back to the last video that we had on Paradise Lost, which is very much there on YouTube, on my channel. So today we'll be starting with the third series of lecture on Paradise Lost, which starts from line number 27. Okay, as I told you earlier, that there are certain features of epic. Obviously, Paradise Lost is a Christian epic. It is the first Christian epic. The first feature of an epic is invocation, and we definitely find invocation in Paradise Lost. That is line number 1 to 26. There are other features of epic also in the invocation that we read the other day. The second feature of an epic was that an epic always begins in medias res. In medias res, that means from the middle. Okay, so now today we'll be dealing with another feature of an epic, that is called initium. This is the third feature of an epic, that is called initium. INITIUM. Now, you people can ask me what initium is all about. Initium means cause. Initium means cause. CAUSE. Why are we talking of initium? Because we haven't yet got the answer to why Adam and Eve ate that forbidden fruit. What led them to the eating of that forbidden fruit? We don't, as of now, know the answer. Obviously, we know it from Bible, but in the text from Paradise Lost, we are yet to receive an answer. So, initium starts from line number 27, and initium means cause. That means from line number 27 onwards, we will be dealing with the cause. Why did our grandparents eat that forbidden tree? Or eat that forbidden fruit, pardon me. Okay, because that was a fruit that was forbidden by God. Yet Adam and Eve, and in fact Adam and Eve were very happy in heaven, in the gardens of Eden, in the gardens of paradise. So what led them to the eating of that particular fruit? So we will be dealing with the cause, the reason behind it, and this is the reason why the third epic feature is that of initium. INITIUM. So initium means cause or reason. So we begin our text from line number 27 today. Okay, line number 27. Follow the text if you have it. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view. Whom is Milton addressing to? Milton is actually addressing the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit was present from the very beginning, and this is the reason why Milton says, say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first what cause moved our grandparents. Now, our grandparents, who are our grandparents? Definitely we know by now that our grandparents, great grandparents, were Adam and Eve. Okay, so grandparents here refer to Adam and Eve. Moved our grandparents in that happy state. So say first what cause. As I told you, from line number 27 we will be dealing with the third feature of an epic, that is initium. Okay, initium means cause. So here Milton is actually asking the Holy Spirit the reason, the cause for the downfall of our grandparents. Okay, Say first what cause moved our grandparents in that happy state. Why do we call this a happy state? Because at that point in time, they were in the Garden of Eden and they were leading a very comfortable and a peaceful kind of a life. Okay. Favored of heaven so highly, God loved Adam and Eve. So they were favored of heaven so highly to fall off from their creator. So if they were so beloved of God, why did they revolt against God? Why did they go against God? Why did they eat that fruit of that forbidden tree from their creator and transgress their will? Transgress here means violate. Why did they violate God's will? Why did they go against God? We don't know the reason. So kindly provide me the reason. These lines are actually referred to the Holy Spirit, and Milton is actually addressing the Holy Spirit here. Okay. For one restraint, they went against God just for one restraint. Now, what was that one condition that was laid by God to Adam and Eve? That they would not eat the fruit of that forbidden tree. That was the one restraint. That was the one condition that God has actually laid upon Adam and Eve. So one restraint here means not eating the fruit of that forbidden tree. That was the only condition that was laid before Adam and Eve by God. Even that condition was not fulfilled by Adam and Eve, and they went on to eat that forbidden fruit. Why did they do so? Okay. For one restraint, Lord of the world besides. Okay, this is the first question. The first question that Milton asks the Holy Spirit is, why did our grandparents eat that forbidden fruit? This is the first question. The second question that they are asking is, who first seduced them to that foul revolt? Who first seduced them to their foul revolt? And as we know from the text, it's very clear that it was Saturn who actually seduced them. So the second question, the first question was what was the cause, and the second question is who seduced them? Who was the one who instigated them to actually eat that particular fruit? Okay. So who first seduced them to that foul revolt? Okay. Now notice carefully, the answer to the second question comes first. The answer is the infernal serpent. The infernal serpent. Now as we know that Saturn disguised himself as a snake and he came to the Garden of Eden and he instigated Eve to eat that particular fruit of the forbidden tree. Eve was instigated, she ate that fruit and she took that fruit to Adam also. Adam also had that fruit, and that is the reason why both of them were punished. Okay, so the reason behind Adam and Eve eating that fruit was the infernal serpent. So the infernal serpent here stands for Saturn, Satan. For one restraint, the infernal serpent, it was, if you want to write the meaning of infernal, infernal means hellish. Infernal means hellish, Hellish, hellish or hell-like. Okay, infernal serpent. The infernal serpent, who it was, whose guile means treachery. Guile means treachery. Treachery. Guile means treachery. Now treachery का मतलब होता है धोखा. ठीक है, ट्रेचरी का मतलब होता है धोखा. मतलब सैटर्न ने धोखे से ईव को इंस्टिगेट किया. सो द इन्फर्नल सर्पेंट, he it was whose guile stirred up with envy and revenge. Mother Akbe, you have to remember that there are certain characteristic features of Saturn that are mentioned throughout Paradise Lost. So the first two features that we get of Saturn, the first one is envy. Envy means a kind of a jealousy. Okay? Envy means jealousy. And revenge, as we know. So these are the two characteristic features of Saturn as we have got as of now. So stirred up with envy and revenge. Achha, Saturn was jealous not of Adam and Eve. You have to remember this. Saturn was actually jealous on God. Okay? Why was Saturn jealous? Because God possessed the kingdom of heaven, whereas God defeated Saturn and had thrown him to hell. Okay, and this is the reason why Saturn feels a kind of a resentment. Saturn feels a kind of a envy. He is envious towards God. Resentment. In fact, this is what I was trying to tell you. As I was telling you a particular philosophy by Nietzsche. There was this man called Nietzsche. Nietzsche has a particular chapter on this particular aspect of Saturn. Obviously, Saturn is not mentioned there. I am actually using that philosophy to explain Saturn's character. The name of that particular chapter is Master-Slave Morality. The name of that particular chapter is Master-Slave Morality. Okay, and this chapter comes from Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche, okay? We pronounce it Nietzsche. Now, this chapter called Master-Slave Morality, in this particular chapter, Nietzsche says that who is a master? Actually, if you go through Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, you will find that Nietzsche, in order to explain master-slave relationship, he draws upon a genealogy. He starts describing master-slave relation from ancient times, from the Hellenic times, from the Grecian times, particularly from the Homer's time, from Homeric age. Okay, you have to remember that Sophocles, Euripides, Aeschylus, these writers come 400 years later than Homer. Homer comes 400 years earlier than Sophocles, Euripides and Aeschylus. Okay, so we are talking of Homeric age. Homeric age, we also during the Homeric age we found masters and slaves. And who are the masters? In fact, Nietzsche works from Nietzsche in his particular book or in this particular chapter, Master-Slave Morality. He is talking about master-slave relationship starting from Homeric age. Nietzsche says, who is a master? A master is one who has the power and who has the will to achieve the impossible. Now, what does a master do with all the power? Definitely the first thing that a master can do with all his power is to oppress people. Particularly kings of the Grecian times. What did they do with all the strength and the money that they had? They oppressed people. Obviously, this is one of the things that person with power will always do. And this is true for each and every person, be it a king or a politician. But on the other hand, a master is also, the master also has the responsibility to create something. He oppresses people, he suppresses people. This is one thing he can do with power. Okay? He has that uninterrupted flow of power, and that is the reason why he could achieve the impossible. Okay. So with his power, he can suppress people. That is one of the things that a king does. And the second thing is, with all his power, he can also create. He can also create certain things. So a master is characterized by suppression of his subject as well as with creating something. A master is one who does not care what his slaves or his subjects actually speak about. He is not concerned with that because he is on a different plane altogether, where the voices of the citizens, where the kind of slangs or a kind of words that the common people actually use does not reach the master's ear, and the master is least bothered about what the subjects are actually saying. This is what a master morality is all about. A master morality is all about doing something. Let people talk. We don't care about it. That is master morality. And it's all subjective also. It's a subjective as well as a literal king. A king behaves in this way, particularly today when we are talking of master-slave morality. A master is one who is psychologically not concerned with what the subjects or other people are talking about me. That is not important. What is important is my life is more important. How to lead that life. That is a master morality, a master's way of thinking. What is a slave morality? Each and every one of us watching this video, including myself, somewhere down the line, we all possess that slave morality. Slave morality entails, slave morality का मतलब क्या है? Slave morality का मतलब है क्योंकि हमारे पास वो पावर नहीं है, क्योंकि हमारे पास वो अनइंटरप्टेड फ्लो ऑफ एनर्जी नहीं है, वो विल पावर नहीं है, तो व्हाट वी डू इज हम लोग चेहरे पे मास्क पहनते हैं. ठीक है, हम लोग चेहरे पे मास्क पहनते हैं. किस बात का मास्क? अरे टू गिव यू वेरी सिंपल एग्जाम्पल कि सपोज ऋतिक रोशन हैज मल्टीपल अफेयर्स, कैटरीना कैफ हैज मल्टीपल अफेयर्स. ठीक है, रणबीर कपूर हैज मल्टीपल अफेयर्स. दे आर नॉट कंसर्न्ड विथ what people are actually talking behind them, but we as common people are very concerned with their lives. ठीक है, what we do is we try to say क्या कैरेक्टर है इन लोगों का, इससे अच्छे तो हम लोग हैं. ठीक है, ये लोग कितना पैसा दारू पे बर्बाद कर देते हैं, इससे अच्छा तो हम लोग हैं कि इतना पैसा बर्बाद नहीं करते हैं. This is a kind of a mask that we wear. बिकॉज अगर हमारे पास भी उतना पैसा होता तो शायद हम लोग भी वही करते हैं. अगर अंबानी के बेटा मोटे से पतला बन सकता है क्योंकि उसके पास पैसा है, तो हम लोग भी वैसा कर सकते हैं. लेकिन पॉइंट ये है कि हमारे पास पैसा नहीं है, और पैसा नहीं है इसीलिए हम लोग वो मास्क पहनते हैं. ये स्लेव मॉरलिटी है, ये हम सब में प्रीडोमिनेंट है. हम सब स्लेव्स हैं. हम लोग सब एक्सक्यूज देते हैं कि कैसा कैरेक्टर है, इतने सारे बॉयफ्रेंड्स, इतने सारे गर्लफ्रेंड्स, इससे अच्छा तो हम लोग हैं कि एक ही गर्लफ्रेंड है, हम लोग कांस्टेंट है. नहीं भाई, हम लोग कांस्टेंट नहीं है, हमारे पास ऑप्शंस नहीं है. ठीक है, अगर ऑप्शंस होते तो शायद हम लोग भी वही कर रहे होते जो वी वांट टू बी दैट, बट वी कांट बी, एंड दैट इज द रीजन वी पुट ऑन सर्टेन मास्क्स. And you have to remember that we feel a kind of a resentment towards those who have everything. ठीक है, so the word is resentment, so the word is envy, jealousy. Because we cannot achieve those things, that is the reason why we feel a kind of a enviousness, jealousy or resentment. And remember, now put this particular logic into Saturn and God's relationship, so you will have a complete understanding of what I am trying to say. If you go through book 1 of Paradise Lost, you will never find God speaking. God does not enter into the scene. It is only about Saturn. It is only about Saturn. Saturn is trying to justify himself. God never comes into Paradise Lost and justifies himself. God is the master morality. Saturn is the slave morality. He is trying to justify himself. And even when he is justifying himself, his character, his nature does not change. He is still envious. He still wants to take revenge. He still feels a kind of a resentment against God. कभी भी भूत की पिक्चर देखोगे, if you ever watch a ghost movie or a supernatural movie, you will find the camera always records the movements of the weaker section that are being portrayed on screen. The camera never records the movements of the ghost because the ghost is all powerful. But the camera will always record the expressions and responses of the people in that house who are stuck in that house. Why? Because the camera always focuses on people who do not possess that kind of a power. So God is omnipotent, God is omnipresent, He is all powerful. So the camera never focuses or pans on God, but the camera definitely focuses on Saturn. A simple example, we don't need to go into that very difficult kind of a philosophy. Just remember a few years back, you people must not have been born by then. There was a time when Australian team of the 90s was far superior. The cricketing team of Australia was far superior to what we actually had in India. So whenever there was an India's tour of Australia, the newspaper never talked of Australia. They never commented on what Australia would do. They were more concerned कि इस बार कितने टेस्ट हार के वापस आएंगे, इस बार कितने वनडे हार के वापस आएंगे, कौन कौन माथा फोड़ के वापस लौटेगा, ठीक है, किसका किसका माथा फटेगा, कौन कौन जीरो पे आउट होगा, ठीक है. वी वेर वेरी अफ्रेड ऑफ ऑस्ट्रेलिया एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम. तो इसलिए हमेशा सारी कहानियां इंडिया को लेकर ही लिखी जाती थी, बिकॉज ऑस्ट्रेलिया वॉज पावरफुल, ही वॉज अ काइंड ऑफ अ गॉड. So we were never talking about Australia as such. Okay, this is what actually happens. We always talk about the weaker sections of society. Okay, so stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. So the mother of mankind, who is this mother of mankind? Definitely we are talking of Eve. Achha, what time his pride had cast him out from heaven. So this is the third characteristic feature of Saturn, his pride, P-R-I-D-E. We found three characteristics of Saturn. The first one is envy, the second one is revenge, and the third one is pride, P-R-I-D-E. Okay. At what time his pride had cast him out from heaven with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid, now aid here stands for help, H-E-L-P. Now you have to remember clearly that Saturn was not the only one to revolt against God. Saturn was not the only one who thought that God has become a kind of a dictator. There were other people too, there were other angels too who thought alike Saturn. Okay, and this is the reason why they helped Saturn to revolt against God. So of rebel angels, by whose aid means help, aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers. Obviously peers, you can write down the meanings of peers. Peers means companions. Peers means companions. Companions. Okay. He trusted to have equaled the Most High if he opposed. When Saturn thought, or Saturn was of the opinion that his power was equivalent to the power that God actually possessed. He too possesses the same power that God actually has. And this belief in his power actually led him to revolt against God. You have to remember that Saturn was called Lucifer when he was in heaven. And Lucifer was the most beloved of God. God loved Lucifer dearly. But this Lucifer revolted against God. Now, I leave you with a particular question. The question is this. God is omnipotent. Omnipotent means all-powerful. God is omnipresent. Omnipresent means God is present everywhere. God is all-knowledgeable. God knows each and everything. What is going to happen, what's not going to happen. So, if God is omnipresent, all-knowledgeable, don't you think that God was aware of the fact that Lucifer someday would revolt against him? Point number one. Point number two. Was God not aware of the fact that Adam and Eve would definitely eat that forbidden fruit? He is God. He must be knowing everything. If God knew that Adam and Eve would definitely eat that fruit, that forbidden fruit, why did God create that tree in the first case? don't you think that somewhere down the line we also have a question mark on the motives of God? Because God is omnipotent, omnipresent, all knowledgeable. If He knew everything, why did He create Lucifer? Why did He create Adam and Eve? So there is a big question mark on the intention of God. What was He trying to do? What was He trying to convey? Okay, we will come to it later. Okay. So, He trusted to have equaled the Most High if He opposed, and with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God. Now you have to remember that these lines are written by Milton. Okay, these lines are written by Milton. These lines are not spoken by Saturn. Saturn's speech will come later. Okay, where Saturn himself will be speaking. This is a line written by Milton, and note carefully that Milton consciously or unconsciously uses two words for God. What are those words? The first word is throne and the second word is monarchy of God. Now these two words are very significant, throne and monarchy, because according to Saturn, God has become a dictator in heaven, and that is the reason why Saturn along with other angels revolted against God. Okay. Milton consciously or unconsciously justifies Saturn's revolt by the use of the word monarchy and throne, because the word monarchy and throne again implies that God truly had become a dictator or a master. And somewhere down the line, this is the reason why William Blake, there was this poet called William Blake. You must be reading about William Blake somewhere down the line in your syllabus. There was a poet called William Blake who appears with the Romantics in the year 1789-92. William Blake, when he read Paradise Lost, William Blake was of the opinion that Milton is on the side of the devil. This was William Blake's reaction when he read Paradise Lost. William Blake came to the conclusion that after reading Paradise Lost, I feel that Milton is on the side of Saturn, is on the side of the devil, because of the use of certain words. What are those words? Throne and monarchy of God. That means Milton too thinks that God had become a dictator in heaven. Now Milton, when he realizes that ultimately his aim in writing Paradise Lost is to justify the ways of God to men. Okay, so the next line, go through the next line, you will find that he makes a slight correction to the next line. Fine, read it. So, against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven and battle proud. Now, raised impious means unholy. That means Milton thinks that God has become a dictator, God has become a monarch, but in the second line, he says that Saturn's revolt against God is impious, is unholy. He is trying to correct himself because he has made a kind of a flaw, he has made a kind of a fault in the line that precedes it. Okay, throne and monarchy, so need to correct it. So he says that the revolt of Saturn against God is an impious revolt, an unholy revolt. Okay. In heaven and battle proud with vain attempt. Vain means useless. So Saturn's attempt was a useless attempt because God ultimately defeated Saturn. Okay. Him the almighty power hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky. Him the almighty power. Now see the construction of the sentence. Him the almighty power. Okay. So the point is this. Milton, no, you have to remember that Milton is not afraid of God. Milton, the purpose of writing Paradise Lost was to justify the ways of God to men. So if Milton kind of says that God has become a monarch or he is sitting on a throne, the purpose of Paradise Lost is not justified. Okay, as simple as that. Now the point is this, him the almighty power. So considering the grammatical structure that English actually has, it's a subject, verb, object kind of a structure that we have. You will find that this particular sentence, him the almighty power, this is not a correct construction. The correct construction will be the almighty power. It will start with the almighty power. The sentence must start with the almighty power. So this is an example of a figure of speech called hyperbaton. So this is an example of a figure of speech called hyperbaton. 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 This is an example of hyperbaton. Hyperbaton means where the grammatical structure of a sentence is inverted for the sake of rhyme or emphasis. Okay, suppose if I say, much have I travelled. Much have I travelled. Okay, so the correct construction is I have travelled much. But for the sake of rhyme and rhythm and emphasis, I have inverted the structure. Much have I travelled. And this happens in poems, while writing poems. Okay, so this is called hyperbaton. Hyperbaton. Okay. So him the almighty power hurled headlong flaming from the ethereal sky with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition. Now what do you mean by the word perdition? Perdition here means hell. Perdition means hell or damnation. Perdition means hell or damnation. There was another word called ethereal. Ethereal means heavenly. Ethereal means heavenly. So Saturn or Lucifer was thrown from heaven to bottomless perdition. Meaning he was thrown from heaven to hell. Okay. With hideous ruin. Ruin means destruction. To bottomless perdition. There to dwell in adamantine chains. Now the meaning of the word adamantine is unbreakable. Okay, unbreakable chains and penal fire. Penal means punishing fire. Now hell is a place where as we too know, we have heard from Hindu myths and mythologies that hell is one of those places. If you are a sinner, you will be boiled in oil. You will be given all sorts of punishment or tortures or third degrees that a particular policeman actually gives a criminal. It depends upon the amount of sin that you have actually committed. If you haven't committed any sin, again you will be in heaven. If you have committed sin, then you will be in hell, boiling in oil. In fact, we all will meet in hell someday or the other. Okay. So, in adamantine chains and penal fire, you have to remember that hell is a place where there is an everlasting fire. Okay, there is always fire burning around. But the most interesting part of this is, though you will kind of burn in that particular fire, hell is actually considered to be dark because that fire cannot be seen but felt. You will burn, but you will never see that fire. Okay? Okay. Who does defy the omnipotent to arms. So why did Saturn receive this punishment? This punishment was received by Saturn because he revolted against God. Because he revolted against the omnipotent God. Omnipotent means all-powerful God. He had taken up arms against God. Okay? Achha. 9 times the space that measures day and night to mortal men. It took Saturn 9 days to reach hell. Okay, it took Saturn 9 days to reach hell. Okay. You have to write this down. 9 er niche underline the word 9 and write it down. By epic convention, by epic convention, by epic convention, by epic convention, 9 is a significant number. 9 is a significant number. The fall of Saturn, the fall of Saturn, the fall of Saturn lasted for 9 days. The fall of Saturn lasted for 9 days. Okay? Okay. We again come back to the text. So 9 times the space that measures day and night, two mortal men, he with his horrid crew lay vanquished. Vanquished here means lay defeated. Rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded though immortal. Now you have to remember that Saturn will never die. Or Saturn can never die because Saturn is an angel and angels are supposed to be immortal. That means his punishment is also immortal. Okay, his punishment is also immortal. So the word vanquished here means defeated. The word gulf means sea, fiery gulf. Gulf means sea, S-E-A. Okay. Need to write down the meaning of line number 53. Write down the meaning of line number 53. The fallen angels, the fallen angels, the fallen angels retain, R-E-T-A-I-N, the fallen angels retain, R-E-T-A-I-N, the fallen angels retain the angelic condition of immortality, the angelic, A-N-G-E-L-I-C, the angelic condition of immortality, but were eternally damned, but were, W-E-R-E, but were, W-E-R-E, were eternally damned, D-A-M-N-E-D. This is line number 53. But were eternally damned. Full stop. Two aspects of Saturn's present condition. Two aspects of Saturn's present condition are hinted here. H-E-R-E, hyphen, defeat, D-E-F-E-A-T, defeat. He is defeated by God. So defeat and immortality. Defeat and immortality. Defeat and immortality. Okay. Okay, so we move on to the next line. Okay, so confounded though immortal, but his doom reserved him to more wrath. Wrath means anger. His punishment, Saturn's punishment has just begun. It is just the beginning. Okay. For now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Now let me make this thing very clear to you. We are slowly but surely moving into the description of hell. Okay, what does hell look like? We are slowly entering into that particular thing. What does hell look like? And you have to remember that Milton was influenced by Dante. There was this man called Dante, Dante, and Dante's book is called Inferno. Okay, so the name of Dante's book is Inferno. You can go through some of the articles on Inferno and you will realize that Dante has actually described hell elaborately in Inferno. I will provide a link to Dante's hell when I upload this video on YouTube. So you will find the link down in the YouTube link. Okay, so you can go through that YouTube link and you will find the difference between Dante's hell and Milton's hell. Though Milton is influenced by Dante's hell, okay, yet Milton's hell is slightly different from Dante's. Why? Where is the difference? The difference lies in the fact that if you go through Dante's hell, you will find that there are 9 layers to that hell. There are 9 layers to that hell. I am talking of Dante's hell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Depending upon the kind of sin that you have committed, you will be thrown on any of the layers. If you are a very small kind of a sinner, you will be there on layer 1. If you have done a little bit of more sin, then layer 2. If you have done something worst, that is unimaginable, then you will be in 9, and obviously you will be going through all the tortures and suffering. So your suffering will definitely be greater than the man who is there in layer 1. So according to Dante, there are 9 layers to hell. Physical layers, and that is very important. I use the word physical layers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when we come to Dante, when we come to Milton, Milton's hell also says that hell is a physical place. It is also kind of a topography. Topography in the sense, it too has a kind of a physicality. Physicality in a sense, fires burn here. We have a lake of fire here. We have rivers. We have ice here. Extreme temperatures on hell. Okay, so topography is there. Physical hell is present in Milton also. But the difference lies in the fact that Milton's hell is also psychological. Milton's hell is not only the topographical or the physical hell of Dante, it is also the psychological hell of Milton. Why do I say so? Because when you go through these 2 lines, go through these lines once again. Reserved him for more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. So we are talking about 2 kinds of pain. Earlier we were talking of fire that was burning on hell. And here fire means physical burning. Physically I am burning. Topographical. And when I say thought of lost happiness, that is psychological. Tarmane hell according to Milton is both physical as well as psychical. Psychical means one that resides in the brain. माথায় রাখবে আমাদের মধ্যে অনেক লোকজন আছে हमारे बीच काफी ऐसे लोग भी हैं या हम लोग भी जैसे हैं हम लोग कभी ना कभी किसी ना किसी समय पे डिप्रेशन के शिकार बनते हैं ठीक है हमें लगता है कि चारों तरफ सिर्फ बर्बादी ही बर्बादी है इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ अ डिप्रेसिंग वर्ल्ड दैट वी आर लिविंग इन फिजिकली भी टॉर्चर्ड होते हैं और साइकिकली भी टॉर्चर्ड होते हैं मेंटल भी एक होता है फिजिकल लेयर का मतलब बड़ा सिंपल सा है जैसे नरक के बारे में हम लोगों ने सुना है कि शरीर जलते हैं गरम तेल में तुमको भुना जाता है वो फिजिकल लेयर है और मेंटल लेयर का मतलब है जो आप सोच के जलते हैं कि मैं कहाँ था और कहाँ आ गया. ठीक है. So this is the difference between a Milton's hell and Dante's hell. So before we move any further, let me give you some of the characteristic features of Milton's hell, and this needs to be written down. Okay. So the first point that we need to write here is this. Number one, Milton's hell is both a topographical. Milton's hell is both a topographical in a sense physical that I was talking about. Topographical. Milton's hell is both a topographical and a psychological entity. It's both a physical as well as psychological entity, combining elements of both the Renaissance, and the medieval belief system, combining elements of both the Renaissance and the medieval belief system. Point number one. Point number two. Milton adheres to the medieval concept. Milton adheres to the medieval concept of hell. Milton adheres to the medieval concept of hell as a topographical entity, depicts hell, depicts hell with all the geographical features, that is the lake of fire, volcanoes, hills, etc. Okay, this is the second point. So this is what is meant by topographical. Topography, in fact, while we were in our school days, when we were in class 10, if you remember, in geography we used to have that topographical sheet, valleys, hills, mountains, rivers. So hell is about that topography and also about psychology. Okay, point number 3. Milton paints hell in a doleful shade, doleful, D-O-L-E-F-U-L, in a doleful shade, S-H-A-D-E, of horror, gloom, G-L-O-O-M, gloom, and desolation. Horror, gloom, and desolation. Okay, horror, gloom, and desolation. This is the description of hell that Milton actually gives. Okay, it is a place where you find horrible things, gloomy things, many darker things, and desolation. Desolation is just the opposite of hope. Okay, this is a place where there is no hope. People are in despair. They are desolate, isolated from everyone. Okay, that means Milton's hell that we are talking about is a very darker kind of a place, a gloomy kind of a place. Okay, tarpore next point is hell as a place of extremes. Hell as a place of extremes. Hell as a place of extremes. Full stop. It is pictured as a place. It is pictured as a place where flood, F-L-O-O-D, where flood and whirlwind, where flood and whirlwind, W-H-I-R-L-W-I-N-D, where flood and whirlwind of tempestuous fire, of tempestuous, T-E-M-P-E-S-T-U-O-U-S, whirlwind of tempestuous fire, coexist with the cold and the ice. Coexist with the cold and the ice. Coexist with the cold and the ice. You have to remember, this is not to write. You have to remember that hell is a place where you will find extreme temperatures. On the one hand, you will be finding extreme kind of hot weather. On the other hand, you will be finding extreme cold weather. Hell is about extremes. Okay, I will give you a diagram of Milton's hell, and you will be able to locate what I am saying, because it's very much written on the topographical thing where ice is or where heat is. Okay, so hell is characterized by its extremity. On the one hand, you have extreme cold, on the other hand, you have extreme warm or hot weather. But you have to remember that in extreme conditions, emotions actually meet. You have the same sensations in extreme emotions. When you are too happy, when you are extremely happy, you cry. When you are extremely sad, you cry. So extreme emotion kind of bring out the same emotion. Similarly, extremely hot, you will burn. Extremely cold, again you will have that burning sensation. So hell is a place of extreme. Okay. The next point that we need to write is hell as a psychological entity. Hell as a psychological entity. Hell as a psychological entity. Okay, now hell as a psychological entity, as I told you just now, the lines we read are examples of this particular thing. We are talking of a psychological state. I was very happy in heaven, but now I am not that happy, so I am contrasting it. And you have to remember, this contrast actually brings about unhappiness. We usually do the same thing. We try to compare ourselves with others, and that is where we feel psychologically demoralized or demotivated. So we need to stop comparing ourselves to something or some people other than ourselves. If you need to compare yourself, compare it with your own self. You need to see how much you have improved, how you were 10 years back or 5 years back, and how much you have improved. So it's depending on that contrast and comparison that you need to improve yourself. So when you try to compare yourself to someone else, that is where the psychological depression enters. Okay, so hell as a psychological entity. Okay, next point we will be coming to it is emotions in hell. Emotions in hell. Emotions in hell. Hell embodies EMBODIES. Hell embodies the inescapable feelings. Hell embodies the inescapable feelings. Hell embodies the inescapable feelings of despair, DESPAIR, of despair, gloom, GLOOM, and misery, MISERY. So people who are in hell will experience these emotions. Despair means without hope, gloom means darkness, and misery means sadness. These are the emotions that are exclusively reserved for hell. Okay, these are some of the points that we need to know about hell. I will provide 2 links down below the YouTube video when I will be updating it. Go through that particular thing. The concept of hell, Milton's hell, will become clear to you, as well as the difference between Dante's and Milton's hell will also become clear to you. You need to do that in order to understand the concept of hell, because questions might be asked on Milton's hell. Okay, you need to answer a question of about 5 to 10 marks. So you need to go through those links to write an answer on hell. Okay, now moving on. Both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Now I am reminded of a particular Greek mythological story. The name of that particular it was written into a particular poem by Tennyson, Alfred Lord Tennyson. The name of that particular man was Tithonus. Tithonus was a character in Greek mythology. Tithonus was not a god or a demigod. He was a common man. Okay, this is a story that has been taken from Greek mythology. Tithonus was very handsome. Okay, he was so very handsome that the goddess of dawn, DAWN, don't consider it to be the other dawn that we have, DON, that goddess of dawn, DAWN. Okay, so the goddess of dawn in Greek mythology is Aurora, AURORA, or Eos. People call her Aurora or Eos, EOS. Okay, so Aurora was actually the goddess of dawn, and she fell in love with Tithonus. Tithonus was so very handsome that goddesses are actually falling for Tithonus. Okay, we human beings can also make goddess fall in love with us. The only thing that we need to do is to use X perfumes and dews, so that fairies and angels can come down from heaven and land on earth. So just use X perfumes for that. It's not a big deal. Coming back to this. So Tithonus was loved by Aurora. Tithonus did not love Aurora. You have to remember that. The goddess loved Tithonus. So the goddess came to this particular earth and proposed Tithonus. So it was a girl coming down on earth and proposing Tithonus, who was a common ordinary man. So Tithonus had laid down a particular condition. What was that condition? Please grant me immortality. Because if I marry you, I am a mortal, I am a human being, I will die. But you are a goddess, you won't die. So I also want to be immortal. So kindly grant me immortality. So Aurora went back to her father, who also is a god, not a goddess, god, and requested her father to please grant Tithonus with immortality. Initially, her father was very reluctant to do so. But later on, when the god realized that his daughter is seriously and sincerely in love with Tithonus, he decided Okay, I can't see you sad, so let it be. Chalo, I grant Tithonus immortality. So Tithonus becomes immortal and he marries Aurora. Now, if you go through the poem called Tithonus written by Alfred Lord Tennyson, you will find that Tithonus is sitting on the chariot of his wife, Aurora. Or he is sitting on the chariot of Aurora. He no longer lives on earth. He lives in heaven. He is an immortal being. He is sitting on the chariot of his wife and he is crying. He is looking down on earth. He is looking at a graveyard from above. He is looking at those people who are being buried under the earth. And Tithonus is crying. The drops of tears are actually falling on the graveyard. Why is Tithonus crying? Because there is a certain flaw or there is a certain wrong that Tithonus has actually done. Tithonus did not think about the fact that granting immortality or having immortality does not mean that he will not grow old. He should have asked his wife immortality with youth. But instead, Tithonus asked for just immortality. So as the poem begins, we find that Tithonus has grown as thin as a skeleton, grown old. He has become a shadow of his former self. He looks like a shadow than a human being. But he is immortal. He will not die. But now he wants to die. And that is the reason why he is crying. So what happened to Tithonus? For Tithonus, immortality became a curse. Curse. Similarly, Saturn was an angel. And Saturn's immortality has become a curse for Saturn also. Because the punishment that he will be meted out in hell will not be a temporary punishment. It will be a permanent punishment because Saturn, being an angel, will never die. He is immortal. So his punishment is also immortal. So immortality became a curse for Tithonus. Similarly, immortality also became a curse for Saturn. Okay. So we move on. Round he throws his baleful eyes. Now, baleful here means sorrowful eyes. Round he throws his sorrowful eyes that witnessed huge affliction and dismay. Now, you have to remember that it took Saturn and his angels 9 days to reach hell. So, when they were thrown to hell, when they came to hell after 9 days, they were all in an unconscious state. They were all in an unconscious state. So a little while later, it is Saturn who gains consciousness. So Saturn is the first man to gain consciousness. So when he gains consciousness, he looks around him. He looks at the environment in which he and his fellow rebels have actually were thrown into. That witnessed huge affliction and dismay. Saturn looked around him and what he saw was affliction. Affliction means misery, sadness and dismay mixed with obdurate pride. Obdurate pride means Saturn has been defeated, but he is obstinate. He is unyielding. Saturn will not surrender. His pride will never surrender before God. Okay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. So these are the two things that Saturn can never give up against God. Okay. Achha. At once, as far as angels can he view, the dismal situation waste and wild. Now this is a description of hell. What do we find in hell? Each and everything is a kind of a waste. It's a wild place. Okay. A dungeon horrible. Now what do you mean by a dungeon? A dungeon means an underground prison. Dungeon means an underground prison. A dungeon horrible on all sides round as one great furnace flame. Now what do you mean by a furnace? Furnace means a kind of, if you have ever been to a brick kiln, कभी ईट भाटा जाओगे जहाँ पर ईट बनते हैं या जहाँ पे शमशान घाट है. अभी तो शमशान घाट में इलेक्ट्रिक फर्नेस आ गया है जहां पर मरने के बाद बॉडी को जलाया जाता है. अराउंड 1200 डिग्री सेल्सियस और 1400 डिग्री सेल्सियस में बॉडी को जलाया जाता है. दैट इज एक्चुअली अ फर्नेस. एकदम देखना, एकदम लाल रंग का आग दिखता है अंदर से. कभी शमशान घाट जाओगे तो दिखेगा फर्नेस. तो हेल इज अ प्लेस जहां पे हमेशा फर्नेस जल रहा है, शरीर हमेशा जल रहे हैं. लेकिन सैटर्न और उसके फेलो जो रेबल्स हैं वो कभी मरेंगे नहीं, जलेंगे जरूर. और यहाँ पे देर आर टू टाइप्स ऑफ जलना, देर आर टू काइंड्स ऑफ बर्निंग दैट वी आर रेफरिंग टू. एक फिजिकल बर्निंग है, फिजिकली आग लगी है, जल रहे हैं. और एक साइकिक बर्निंग है कि कोथाए छिलम, कहां थे और कहां आ गए. ठीक है. सो देर आर टू काइंड्स ऑफ बर्निंग दैट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट. Okay. So a dungeon horrible on all sides round as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light. माने आगुन जोल से आग जल रही है लेकिन उस आग से लाइट नहीं है. From those flames no light, but rather darkness visible. So darkness visible is an example of oxymoron. Two opposite words are placed side by side. Darkness visible is an example of oxymoron. Okay. अगर if hell is dark, so the question naturally arises, how can it be visible? And if it is visible, how can it be dark? So there are two opposite words. So what kind of a place is hell? Hell is a shadowy zone. Shadowy in a sense, अभी जो बाहर का आसमान है अगर आप देख लें, शाम के 5:45 बजे हैं, सनसेट होने वाला है. जब सनसेट हो जाएगा और हल्की हल्की रोशनी रहेगी 6:30 के लगभग, दैट इज अ शैडोई जोन. हेल में हमेशा वैसी ही रोशनी रहती है. इट इज अ शैडोई प्लेस. डार्कनेस येट विजिबल. ओके. सो डार्कनेस विजिबल सर्व्ड ओनली टू डिस्कवर साइट्स ऑफ ऊ मीन्स सॉरो. माने जितनी भी रोशनी है, द अमाउंट ऑफ लाइट दैट इज प्रेजेंट इन हेल, that is enough to see the kind of suffering that is there all around. Okay. Regions of sorrow. So hell is a place of sorrow. Doleful shades. Doleful again means sorrowful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell. Now hell is a place where you do not find peace, where you do not find rest. ना यहाँ पर peace है, ना यहाँ पे rest है. होप भी नहीं है. होप नेवर कम्स, दैट कम्स टू ऑल. बट टॉर्चर विदाउट एंड स्टिल अर्जेस, एंड फायरी डेल्यूज फेड विथ एवर बर्निंग सल्फर अनकंज्यूम. यहाँ पे सल्फर जो मिनरल है बहुत ज्यादा पाया जाता है, और सल्फर जहां पर होगा वहां पर आग लगना मुनासिब है. मैंने एक ऐसी आग जल रही है जो कभी बुझेगी नहीं, बिकॉज यहाँ पे सल्फर जो है वो भारी मात्रा में पाया जाता है. तो हेल इज अ प्लेस वेयर यू फाइंड दैट फायर विल बी बर्निंग कंटिन्यूअसली ड्यू टू द प्रेजेंस ऑफ सल्फर अनकंज्यूम्ड. Such place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious. So this is the description of hell that we find in Paradise Lost, and this is the kind of place that God has actually ordained for for the revolutionaries, for the people who have actually revolted against him. So we will be stopping here today at line number 70. Okay, we will be stopping here with line number 70. We will be meeting again on Saturday next. So if you have any questions regarding these particular lines that we completed today, you can ask me on the comment section in the YouTube, as well as you can personally message me on WhatsApp. Okay, I suppose these lines are clear to you. So go through the lines, the invocations, as well as the initium, the cause, why Adam and Eve actually ate that fruit. So today what we dealt with was the initium, the cause, who caused the revolt, who caused the rebellion of Adam and Eve. We came to an answer to that particular question, and we also find a description of what hell is all about. Okay? And as we told you, we found a figure of speech called oxymoron, OXYMORON. So darkness visible is an example of oxymoron. So with this, we end this lecture of ours for today. Hope to meet you soon again. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day. Have a safe weekend.